Welcome to episode 2 of the Stress Test Podcast. Last time, there's a couple of topics that we discussed. I think we covered generational wealth,
Yep.
and then we transitioned into, um, I think, well, we transitioned into what would we pass on to our kids, specifically in
Yeah.
the context of. Actually, I don't know remember what we covered last time.
No, I think you were on the right track. And then we also covered college. Is college needed for you to be successful? We discussed that for a bit. But yeah, I think just with those three topics alone, it was pretty packed.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
and just to give folks some context, we've already been having chats for about hour and a half
An hour and a
already.
half at least.
It's 12:40 out here on the East Coast in DC. 12:40 a.m.
Yeah,
So
we were supposed to start this around like
10.
10:30.
Yeah.
And we sat around talking downstairs and used up some of our topics
Yeah, we
actually.
might have shot some of our bullets, so hopefully it's not
Yeah.
blanks this time around.
So we're gonna cover some topics. I think we've been fortunate enough to have been submitted by some of our viewers. I think we've got a list of some topics. You want to pull them up, Rocky?
Yeah, and once again, thanks to all our viewers out there who are following us, subscribing. Think the things that we're discussing are of interest.
Right.
So, yeah, I think let's just open up, the topics that were submitted by viewers here, and we'll try to pick which ones are apt here. So I'll start from the bottom up or the most recent, and then work my way through. The first question: toxic cultural beliefs you grew up learning about, and how it's influenced your life
That's a
as
good
an
one.
adult.
That's a good one. I feel like
That's a
you've
good one.
got the Tongan culture
Yes.
and the culture from like Oakland, California. I feel like there's a mix, right? You
Yes.
can bring a good
Like the
perspective
urban
there.
side,
The
yeah.
urban side of it.
Growing
And
up in
then,
America.
For
Yeah.
me, I feel like I've got the conservative, Muslim,
Yep.
Pakistani sort of perspective as well, because that's how I grew up at least.
Yep.
But I've been here for a long time, so I've got the Americanized sort of
Yeah.
aspect of it too. I feel like, yeah, we can have a really good conversation
So
about that
we'll go
too.
to that one. Well, let's see first.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
We got to work our way through.
Yeah.
So I'll keep the users anonymous just out of respect. I want to make sure if you do feel like you want to be called out, please let us know, and we'll make sure to call out your name with the associated question for our next episodes. The next question: how the wage gap became even larger because of COVID.
That's an interesting one. I
It
think
is.
I don't actually have enough context into that.
Yeah.
There's probably certain areas, and I feel like new industries and new businesses that got created, just as if we're just talking about
That's a
it
good
from
point.
at a surface level, surface area perspective. But other than that, I probably have to do a little bit more research
Same.
before diving into that.
Same. I just came across. To be honest here, I did a bit of research into this before we started this conversation. Um, mostly around the K-shaped recovery, where you have two groups, and one group is exponentially growing, while the other group itself is not growing as fast or depreciating to some extent. But to your point, Hammad, I think we should give it its diligence and probably have a discussion about it at a later time. So
Yeah.
we'll pass
Yeah,
this one.
exactly. I probably need to do some more research and
Yeah.
just so we can have some references we can pull up.
Sounds good. Next one. What is the current definition of the American dream?
That's a solid one too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
how has it shifted from the past? I do think that's a good one. Just considering that we're both children of immigrants, so we're not
Right.
as far away from the American dream as our parents may have saw it. But what are your thoughts on that?
I
Just
feel like
generally
I feel like it's a
speaking
really good idea because a really good topic to talk about because I feel like it's really about a perspective. The
Yeah.
question is based on perspective, so you don't really need facts and hard truths that you have to reference to talk about. It's really just about what you think, and I think that's what we're good at, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
We'll keep
that'd
that
be a
one
good
in the
one.
queue as well.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, awesome. So another one was submitted: financial struggles that immigrants have with finance. So specifically around pyramid schemes. So Tongans have this thing called a libanga. I'll clarify: it's not a pyramid scheme if done right, but there are opportunities for just bad actors.
Bad actors to
Yeah,
be malicious.
yeah, be
Yep.
malicious in those situations. So maybe that's something that we can revisit,
Yeah.
or do you want to talk about that in today's segment as well?
Let's see how far we get. I also want to sort of point out that we're trying to think about how we can make this format a little bit more digestible for
Yeah.
folks, because I feel like our past two have been pretty long, and I feel like I'm just curious to experiment and see where the audience sort of stays in tuned.
Yeah.
'Cause I want to make sure we're not just releasing content that people just stop watching it after like a few minutes, because it is long.
Yeah.
And we don't really yet have the audio only source that we can listen to in the car or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe we keep it short for today.
No, that makes sense. And I mean, just for the folks out there who are listening or watching, A, thank you again for submitting these topics. And then B, like to Hammad's point, we're still working through this. This is our now third episode. We're using we started at 0 as our first index. So we're going to always change formats. So if you have any suggestions on how we can make those formats better for your viewing, please let us know. And we'll provide, we take that feedback in and iterate that on that as needed.
Yep, sounds good.
So the last one, and this one, I don't know how you feel about this one. A review of the final season of AOT, Attack on Titan, for those not in the know. Yes. What are your thoughts on that?
First, Attack on Titan is an anime, and it's not just any anime. People think anime, they think like kid shows. Animes are not kid shows. Let's get that straight first of all. Animes are for grown-ups too, all right? And Attack on Titan is one of the most dark animes that you can watch currently. I think it just wrapped up its final season, if I'm not wrong. I've seen all of it.
Did the manga
manga wrapped up last year?
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually caught up to the last season, and then I ended up reading the last few chapters of the manga.
Yeah. So a bit more context there too. Yeah. I was of the ilk prior to meeting Hammad and Jacob. I got to give him a shout out here too. That animes were kiddie shows until Hammad and Jacob showed me the light, if you will. And the light, I mean that specifically. Death Note was the first anime I ever watched, and I've been hooked ever since. I do also see that the public in general is shifting more towards anime. I mean, look at Netflix.
Netflix is changing a lot of that.
Exactly, right?
And I feel like a lot of people were like closet anime fans, like in high school and stuff.
I also think it's cool now.
Yeah,
to be
it's cool. So everybody's like, I love anime. It's like I've been about the anime life since I was in middle school. Yeah, get to my level. You know?
I know, but back in the day, to your point, when I was growing up, like you say, you're watching anime, you're like, what? I mean, because like from the Americanized version too, we were getting like Sailor Moon, if you want to even call that an anime.
Right.
Dragon Ball Z was nice, but is that necessarily an anime?
Yeah, it's an anime.
So yeah, we've got that. I mean, but like, what else was an anime back in the day? I do think it just came with a bad stigma when it first landed here in America, and like people just use that as kind of like.
I also feel the people that are becoming adults now, are sort of treating that as a people are becoming adults now. They were watching anime, whereas before when we were kids, the adults were not of the anime generation, so they're like, oh, it's kid stuff. So like that sort of perception was perpetuated more and more, and so people like didn't talk about it. But now it's like, people are, as you're entering adulthood, you realize, wait a second, this guy also watches anime or knows about it, or at least watched at some point, or did something like that. So I think it's becoming more acceptable.
And the storylines too, I would say, are more complex and rich than any other storyline you'll see in other mediums out there, like whether it's like live action theater or anything like that. Like the amount of character depth that gets built there, it's like chef's kiss, or it's just beautiful, man. Like Death Note, I think that was the first. I think that was the best one to introduce a non-believer, if you will, into anime. And then of course
that's an interesting first anime, honestly.
Why is that? Can you speak about that real quick?
I mean, I would have guessed like Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, the big names that are still taking over, that are still like the top of the anime world.
Maybe honestly. I should thank you too for that. Then.
Attack on Titan is on the top of the anime world as well, but
I think Naruto, that was the second one.
Bleach
I got
and One
into.
Piece are like the old OGs. That were actually aired on Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, or something as well. So, but do you want to keep talking about this, or do you?
Man, like I feel like we need to have like a dedicated series, probably
of anime. Yeah, I agree. Actually, that's good.
Because
I also want to spoil. I don't want to spoil.
We'd have to put spoiler alerts up for those episodes.
You haven't even watched the end. like the last 2 seasons yet.
Yeah, I haven't watched the last
So
2 seasons.
you
Yeah.
need to watch those before we
Yes, I
discuss it.
do. Well, I've been on other shows.
Well, we talk about other
Mm,
show, but Attack on Titan,
yeah,
specifically since the request I believe was
yeah.
made for Attack on
Because
Titan. You
that,
need
I
to
mean,
get
that
around
was the
to it.
second one that y'all put me on, was Attack on Titan. I think.
Probably, yeah. I think it was like sort of getting big at the time.
Yeah.
When it was starting at the time.
Yeah.
When it first came out, it was just so it was really good.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge One Piece fan though. So
Yeah, you
I
got me
read
on
that.
One Piece.
I read that every week. There's also some Korean
Don't sleep on it.
webtoons. Don't sleep
Yeah.
on those because there's a couple out there that I've been reading for years now,
Yeah.
and I read it every week when it comes out. So anyway, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother. Yeah, we can actually go on that topic for days. But yeah, so I think we have a good lineup here of topics that we can discuss. So with that being said, I think we agreed. Let me go ahead and pull it up again. That we're going to talk about toxic cultural beliefs, right? That we grew up learning
Yeah, that's a good one.
as part of our culture and how it's influenced our life, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then, which is a great one. Shout out to the person who submitted that one. And then the second one is, what is the current definition of the American dream, and how has it shifted from the past? And I like that one because, to your point, it really allows us to convey our perspectives, differing or not, right,
Yeah.
on what we believe the American dream is. And of course, I think we also have a close connection to our parents who are immigrants who
Right.
came here with a sense of the American dream. So I think we should probably discuss that
Yeah,
as well,
yeah.
right?
And I was even born.
You were even born, yeah,
Pakistan,
exactly.
So I am an immigrant myself.
Yes.
You know, technically I am a first generation immigrant.
Yep.
As well, but I was relatively young, so I sort of grew up.
So you have
American.
like the pure definition right there.
I grew
right?
up American with with a Muslim background and a Pakistani background, right? So
Mhm.
I'm pretty close to with my culture as well,
Yeah.
my religion. So yeah, I think this would be a good, interesting conversation. Let's talk about it.
All right, let's go. So the first one, I think probably I'll let you pick the first one.
The culture, like the
Is that
toxic
the one you want to talk about
yeah,
first?
I think so.
Let's
I
shoot.
think let's
Yeah.
let's talk about it. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
one
so toxic cultural beliefs that we grew up with. I guess, like, of course, both of us have differing cultures, common in many ways, especially when you look on just like at least being Tongan, there's a huge, I guess, reliance on being connected to the religious aspect of it. But I think where we differ here is probably like there's a colonialism aspect as well to the Tongan culture that I will admit right now that I'm not well versed in. Like, what was our culture, and specifically speaking to that, what did our culture look like prior to colonialism? And that's something I'm probably not as proud of. So I probably want to take a look back and try to figure that out. But from a toxic cultural standpoint, I do think there's a lot of instances where we probably should evolve as a culture in order to fit, like, capitalism in America specifically, right? So I think there are things that we bring from our culture that probably don't fit like how you should operate as a human being in general. And then of course it specifically doesn't help you optimize to be a I guess high performing citizen here. So I'll open that as a general, and then like I'll pass it to you to discuss what you'll probably discuss on your behalf
Yeah,
of toxic
absolutely. Let's
cultural
do it.
beliefs.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to, I do want to caveat too. Like, there are beauties in my culture that I want to flag as well, because I do think we should probably give
Yeah,
it
this
an
is
unbiased
this won't
view.
be an attack on Tongan culture. This is not an attack on Pakistani culture. Really, it's just talking about what
Our perspectives.
our beliefs, honestly,
Yep.
our personal beliefs about like what we saw as we grew up,
Yeah.
right, in our cultures, and right now at this day, at this time,
Yeah.
what are our thoughts on some of those things?
Agree.
Do we agree with some of those things? Do we disagree with some of those
Agree.
things? Maybe that'll change in the future, right? I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's really just about what are we thinking right now.
Mm-hmm.
So again, not an attack. It's really just like, did we agree with some of those things or not?
No doubt.
So.
All right. So do you want to generalize some of the things you were going to want to go into with the Pakistani culture?
Honestly, there's not anything specific. I just want to talk about my day to day, like things I observe in my day to day with my family.
Yeah.
Like some of the things that are like just norms in like not just my family, but like across the board,
Yeah.
that I feel like I've come to disagree with, or I just disagree with having the perspective that I have.
Yeah.
right? And there's nothing specific. I think there's not really a broad category. I'm just probably just to talk about certain things.
Yeah.
Probably would stick with one or two because I feel like we can go on for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we've already been talking for like 15, 20 minutes by now. So
No doubt. Let's
and
kick it off then, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So some of the things that I want to flag as really a beauty, and this is a double-edged sword maybe, with the Tongan culture, is the family aspect, right? So I think while there's a beauty of being connected to your family members, I think the negative aspect, I won't say toxic, but the negative aspect is that dependency that you build. Excuse me. I do believe that sometimes that independence that you typically need to succeed here in America is lacking for a lot of Tongan folks because of the reliance on like certain family members, or I'll even take a step back and say it's very hierarchical. So it's very hard for a lot of folks to innovate within certain constraints because they either can't, move independently because they believe they'll be ostracized by family members, or B, maybe we're just not well educated enough on the culture itself, on the deeper meaning, because once again, colonialism has kind of skewed a lot of the aspects of our Tongan culture. For example, like one of the things that has occurred in my life personally is my father passed away last month, right? So I've been really thinking about just like the culture itself and how it's impacted me. But during the funeral, there was just a lot of aspects to it where I necessarily didn't agree with, like, from like doing, these massive cookouts in order to give out to the community. I wasn't sure, like, from a financial perspective, it's like it's a huge hit.
That was
right?
required, right?
Yeah, it was
in
required.
your culture, it's like sort of a requirement, and if it's like you don't do it, it's like looked down upon.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I like the fact that you brought that up because I think that's what's more concerning to me, right?
Right.
Is not the fact that like I have to do it. It's more like how the community will respond if you don't do it, right? Like you should understand. Like, fortunately, we're well enough, or we were in a situation where we were able to provide those instances.
Not everybody is.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I think that's the issue. A lot of folks aren't able to do that as freely in certain situations, and that concerns me, right? Like, and if you really look at the ethos or the intent of why those things occurred, is because back in the islands, right, you had families who had, hey, I have like a banana tree or a land with many banana trees. I can supply that. Other families would have like, hey, I live by the sea. I have a lot of fish. I can bring that, right? So it's more communal in that sense. Where here in America, it's not. We all kind of have a base template that we can operate off of. So it's not. It doesn't fit that same ethos or intent, in my opinion. So once again, I'll say humbly, it's in my opinion. And then the second portion to that is I didn't understand or wasn't educated, and I have to take accountability on that to understand the narrative of why we do certain things. So, for example, like I was fortunate enough to have these discussions with my sister, who was educating me on like the purpose of like wearing certain like we call these the dresses, or not dresses, the mats that we wear to surround us, falas. And she related it back. I won't go into the story, just to keep it short, but she related it back to like the story of how like these voyagers came to meet the king and they didn't have anything to present themselves with. So they, grabbed their sails, right, which were these mats, and draped themselves in that in order to showcase the king the reverence that they believed he deserved. And the king took that reverence with high regard, and then like made sure that during like high ceremonial events that they would wear those mats as a presentation of like reverence and respect to those who were holding these events. So I think those are things that I didn't understand at the time, and I saw it as like we have this term called whakahela, where it's like, oh, you're just doing too much, man. Like that's how I felt throughout the process. But once I understood that, the narrative behind it, it actually made me rethink that belief, and totally have a different aspect on it.
Yeah, I definitely especially the first part. I think it's really good that you showed two sides of it. Like you had one that was like society or like sorry the community,
Yeah.
the Tongan community is gonna look down upon us if we. And I feel like there's two sides to that. It's
Yeah.
like, a, the fact that we give a shit
Yeah.
that the Tongan community is gonna look down on us, right?
Yeah.
Is like so instilled because in the community. That's a
Yeah.
communal thing, right?
Yep.
Like communal thing is like that's instilled in you, and
Yeah.
that itself is shitty. The fact that we have to feel that
Yeah.
way, and also just the other side that they expect it
Yeah.
is, I know it's like sort of subtle but difference, but it's two sides to it. It's like
Yeah.
your interpretation
Of my worth within the community.
yeah,
right?
it's like
Yeah.
oh yeah, like we care what they
Yeah.
think, and also they will look down on
Yeah.
us, right? It's a two-way street. That's really shitty.
Yeah.
But the other one that you brought up with the outfits, like it's just more of like the cultural
Yeah.
thing. It's like it's a learning historical thing. That's not really. I feel like that's good. It's more like like you said, it's like it's a concept of you're doing too
Yeah.
much, but that's a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
That you're doing too much is a matter of perspective, right? Not really somebody's looking down
Yeah.
on you or anything. You're just like, do we have to do that? And I think like that's not really toxic.
Yeah.
That one's not really toxic.
No,
in my
that
opinion.
is more beauty, right?
Yeah.
Like that makes me or encourages me, motivates me to really understand and get in touch with my culture
Yeah.
much closely,
Yeah,
right?
makes
Like,
sense.
and it's something that I really hold in high regard now. And once again, like, if I weren't educated on that fact, right? I wouldn't have known, and I would
Yeah.
have like been like, "Why the f am I doing this?" You know what I'm saying? This is some bullshit, right? But like now that I'm educated on that, like I have right, I have the right, or I reserve the right to change my opinion given new information. I've been given new information. Now I'm pivoting towards figuring out like, okay, how do I update my priors here? How do I learn more about my culture? Because I think this story is beautiful. I think like the linkage to that's beautiful, and these are things that I want to pass down to my kids.
Right.
But I think there's also toxic aspects to culture as well, right? And I
Yeah.
think those toxic aspects, and most of it too, like the toxic aspects, I will say like, I think initially when some of these like cultural beliefs, when they were built with good intents, right? But as they say, the road to hell is filled with good intents, right? And there's always bad actors at play here. So I will caveat by saying like, these are toxic beliefs that aren't really anchored themselves as a toxic belief. I think they're just agnostic to whatever the culture is. However, I do think that bad actors amplify it further. And of course, like if it doesn't evolve with certain times, that can make it toxic as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So
Cool. I mean, that's pretty good perspective. I think.
Yeah.
There's probably other things you could probably talk about.
yeah,
I think there's probably other aspects of it. So I can dive into a
Yeah.
little bit of mine. I think my top things are things I've observed on a day to day
mm-hmm.
over throughout my life
Yeah.
that I've sort of come to disagree with, and I feel I've changed other people's minds about it too.
Yeah,
Like bringing that perspective.
within the community.
Not the
Is that what
community,
you
like
mean?
I just
Okay.
like with them, even just direct family members, honestly, and I think that's all you can hope for. At the end of
Yeah,
the day,
that's
like
true.
it's more of like you I don't want to go out and preach. Like I'm not. That's not
Yeah.
me. I'm not gonna go about and preach, but everybody's okay with.
Yeah.
If they're okay with it, as long as it's not hurting anybody, there's nothing for me to like sort of change their mind about. Like if they're happy in their lives they're living, I'm not there to like change
Yeah.
their happiness, right? For me, it's like there's these things would affect my happiness if I didn't abide by them, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna uphold them for myself, right? So therefore,
Based on your values, right?
Based on my
Yeah.
values, and people who are close to me obviously need to know that, so that
Yeah.
they know what makes me happy, and that I want certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess specifically, let me just talk about it. Again, these are going to be fairly small, like minute trivial things that
Yeah.
seem trivial, but I think like generally like they add up to a lot bigger
Yeah.
scope. One is let me talk about if you have a kid, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you have you're married, man, woman.
Yep.
You're married, you have a kid,
Mm-hmm.
right? The role of the man and the woman as far as taking care of the child,
Yeah.
right? I think in a lot of societies, in a lot of cultures, it's really, even though sometimes American culture, right? It's
yeah.
like the woman changes the diapers
Yeah.
or the man does it. But I think that's not
Yeah.
always the case. Obviously, there's a lot of men who are changing diapers too.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like there's like this thing where, oh, it's like woman's doing it. And I've sort of caught my parents sometimes like ask, like my sister-in-law taking care of my niece,
Yeah.
right? So my parents like asking my sister-in-law to like calling my sister-in-law to take care of like the diaper of,
Yeah.
of my niece or something, right? But I was like, my brother's just sitting right there doing nothing, and I'm like, yo, you get up and change
Change that diaper,
right? And I
man.
think he's also
Yeah,
very
yeah.
active and proactive about it, but
Yeah.
I think it's more like the mentality is like the cultural mentality is like this woman
Interesting.
should do that. And I think they don't really have an opposition to it. I think
Yeah.
it's more like just trained and instilled in them over
Yeah.
like they came from Pakistan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's instilled in them. So that was one example. It's very like I think that's
Yeah.
toxic, right? I think it's a collaboration at the end of
Yeah.
the day, right?
And I think that bleeds into a lot of cultures as
Yes.
well, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely, I mean, whether you want to say it or not, it's definitely instilled within the American
Yeah.
culture as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So I
And
don't
by
think,
the modern society is like sort of changing that
yeah,
perception of that. But I think that's just one thing that I
mm-hmm.
think comes from that. And I feel like that's I've spoken out
Yeah,
about that. And then other things like my I've told my parents this, and I've told I've told this. Like I don't want somebody like who comes and cooks and like cleans for me, right?
yeah,
And I think this isn't really a toxic thing. I think it is toxic to some degree
yeah,
because I think, and it's prevalent in a lot of cultures. But I'm talking about from a Pakistani perspective. It's like historically, it's been that way where the woman comes and like, cooks, and
interesting.
even if sometimes the woman works, it's like the expectation is the woman has to cook too, and that's not okay with me. I think like it, obviously if one person's working, whether it's the man or the
Yeah,
woman, the person not working has to take, I think, the responsibility.
yeah,
Whether it's man or woman, has to take the
yeah,
responsibility and support the home side of
yep,
things. But if both are working, then it's an equal collaboration,
yeah,
right? And again, sometimes the man should cook, sometimes the woman should cook,
yeah,
right? Again, it has to be fair.
mm-hmm.
It can't just be like the expectation is like you're gonna come home from work and cook me a meal and have
Yeah,
something ready for me, right? Like, what if my wife is a doctor and she's working long hours? Like, and then she comes
yeah,
home and she has
like
to cook for
residency.
me. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not about that life. So
yeah,
I made that very clear. I think that's another thing. I think that's toxic too,
yeah,
right? Um, and I think like just gender norms as well.
yeah,
Just generally, I think a lot of those gender norms are perpetuated
yeah,
in Pakistani culture. I think a lot of American cultures too historically, which is probably changing
yeah,
now, but those gender norms are also prevalent in
yeah.
Pakistani culture, I think, and those are some of the things that I think I just don't see.
Agree with.
Yeah, I don't see
Yeah,
them as like they're not super important
yeah,
roles. I feel you should be balance those out. Um, I mean, there are gender roles that I feel like are important to society,
yep,
right? Like I think when a mom gives birth to a baby, they have like much
yeah,
deeper connection. So I think, naturally do certain things
mm-hmm.
like taking care of the baby because they're so attached to
Yeah,
this human being that came out of them.
mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think that happens, right? But I
Yep,
feel like it's still a collaboration
yeah.
between the man and the woman. I think to
You're saying
and
it
I
should
guess
be more of a collaborative effort.
let me put it this way: it's a collaboration in a relationship, in a
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't want to. I'm saying man and woman because that's what I've just become.
Yep.
I'm straight, so I'm using that
Yep.
reference, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to each their own. At
Yep.
the end of the day. But yeah, I think that is, some of the top level things that come to mind, and they all contribute, I think, to to an umbrella
Yeah.
of things that are toxic,
Yeah.
right?
So you're saying like in this situation the sum is greater than the whole to some
Yeah,
aspect.
and
Like,
also the same thing
these
is,
cuts start to take its toll once you start to add them up.
yeah, and also like the appearance aspect,
Oh yeah.
where like you care about what everybody else is
Everybody
gonna
else
say.
thinks, yeah.
Like for example, I think
Is
there's
that
probably
a
a thing where
problem?
like
Is that a
I
problem
mean,
in the
let me put it this way.
Pakistani culture?
Yeah,
Where people really care? Because that's a problem, in my
Yeah.
opinion, in the Tongan culture, where people are
Yeah.
really adamant
And it's
about what whole happens within
it's
the
about
culture.
all types of shit, right? Like
Yeah.
for example, if I was to go to Pakistan and say like I'm opening up a coffee shop and I'm
Yeah.
gonna sit at the stall, like sit at the cashier
Yeah.
counter myself and do it,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people would look down on that.
What?
Yeah, because again, I think this is true
Interesting.
for a lot of East Asian cultures as
Yeah.
well and South Asian cultures as well,
Mhm.
because for so long they've been so ingrained to like, oh,
Yeah.
I need to become an engineer and go work for like
Yeah.
a good company. I need to become a doctor
Doctor, yeah.
and save people's lives
Yeah.
and do stuff like that. Entrepreneurship is relatively new.
Ah.
I think it's just not as impressive.
Yeah.
But I think that's changing. I think as
Yeah.
people become more have access to the internet and find more avenues to generate wealth and bring in revenue, I think that's perception is changing. But I think today, for the most part, I think if I was to go and say I'm opening up a coffee shop, most people would look in Pakistan would look down on that.
Yeah.
And I feel like the people I've talked to, the people like I've talked to my cousins about this and my like family members back in Pakistan. Like, I've they sort of think the way I do, especially if after I have a conversation with them,
Nice.
they've sort of changed perspectives, even if they didn't believe that in the beginning or saw it that way. Because I think it's also about like who's telling you. If you respect the person who's telling you this,
Yeah.
like I feel like that could change your mind
Yeah.
about.
And
these
you've
sort of
come
things.
from like the ilk of like, working for these high flying companies, making good money and stuff like that. So obviously, if you're thinking of making a change in a certain aspect, entrepreneurship
Yeah.
specifically, I would definitely take that into account and be like, I mean, like for example, when Jeff Bezos started Amazon, right? He was
Right.
a top account hedge fund. I think like he was running he was one of the top executives for a hedge fund at the time, and he saw, based on what he was managing within his portfolio, the growth of e-commerce, right? And people thought he was crazy at the time. They were like,
Right.
"Dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're pulling in $500,000. This was in the mid '90s. Like, why are you just gonna pick up and leave?" To go do this. But he saw the data,
Yeah.
from a business perspective, and said, "Hey, I'm gonna make this jump."
Yeah.
And I think it's useful. But I'm taking us on a tangent here.
No,
I
but I
want to pull
think
it back. Um,
I think so. I talk about what I do is like I talk to people. I talk to my cousin. I explain
Yeah.
like I want to open a coffee shop. Like I'm totally happy.
yeah.
Like
Oh, we've talked
forget
about
leave
that a
this
lot.
leave
Yeah.
the tech world and go open a coffee shop. I love coffee.
Yeah.
And that's a business. And
Yeah.
if I can open up multiple coffee shops and survive on multiple
Yeah.
coffee shops for the rest of my life and like have that wealth come in, that's again generational wealth,
Yeah.
right? I'm totally happy doing that.
Yeah.
And I don't care if I have to sit at the counter in the beginning and or any time afterwards and just like run the counter. I have no
Yeah.
problem with that. I think it's a matter of perception there. I think
Yeah.
so. I guess the follow-up question is, how do you go about changing people's perceptions
Ooh.
on some of these toxic cultural aspects?
Yeah.
Right?
Well.
Like I said, I talk to people, my
Yeah.
cousins. Like I tell them exactly what I'm gonna do. I don't preach.
Yeah.
I don't tell people do this, do this, do
Yeah.
this because I think I don't care at the end of the day. Like if I care about you and you're making a mistake,
Yeah.
I'll tell you you're making a mistake. But I'm not gonna go out and like try and change your perspective on things. If you believe you can be successful doing what you're doing, right?
Then do it.
Then do it, right? And then,
Yeah.
but I will say like I'm in electrical engineering. I'm an electrical engineer by degree.
Yeah.
I'm a software engineer by profession, and
Yeah.
I'm an engineering manager,
Yeah.
doing well, bringing a lot of money, right? So I'm fine financially,
Uh-huh.
but I want to go and open up a coffee shop
Yeah.
because I feel like that's where I'd have fun.
Yeah.
I'd have fun. I feel like I'd spend more time with my family.
Yeah.
I feel like I wouldn't be reliant on a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Right. And I just find it would be fun.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I tell people that, something about the fact that like I've gained a reputation
Yeah.
because I've just by my degree, by what I've accomplished,
Yep.
and where I've come, that they're more likely to just actually take it seriously
Oh yeah.
and not laugh at it. And I think that's what I've seen from my
Yeah.
family actually.
And I think I 100% agree with you on that stance, because I think I've been able to kind of showcase that as well with my family. And to your point, that's the only place I can start, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go preaching on the internet, which is probably going to sound like right now.
Yeah, and you don't
that
even preach to your family.
Yeah,
You just
exactly.
show them by doing
Yeah,
what you're doing.
No
right?
doubt, right? Like, because at the end of the day, to your point, like if you whatever you're doing is making you happy, cool. But if I believe something's toxic, I'm not going to participate in it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're not going to force me to, continue a toxic cultural belief that others may have. I don't really give a fuck. Sorry excuse my French, but like you said, like I don't care what people say about me at the end of the day.
Right.
If I don't really care about them as people, right? Like, let me rephrase that. That
Yeah,
sounds
I mean, I
bad.
think I think
You
what
know
you're
what I'm
trying to
saying?
say
Like,
is
your
like
opinion
your opinion. Like,
is
I'm not
yeah.
interacting with you,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Your opinion changes nothing
Yes.
about my life,
Exactly.
about how I roll
Mm-hmm.
or operate. Then why should I care what
Exactly.
you think?
Yeah.
And I think that's hard for a lot of people to get.
It
And
really
I
is.
think it's not. We're not perfect. So there's definitely people out there that we consider whose opinion we value.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's a healthy thing to have.
Yeah.
I think it's healthy to have people whose opinion you value.
Yeah, it is.
It's important to know, and I'm going to reference the book here, how not to give a fuck.
The subtle art, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I do love that book. Yeah,
So
I mean,
the balance.
because at the end of the day, you're wasting resources, right?
Right.
By thinking about things that are negligible in your life, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if I'm spending time, which is a functional resource, right? Wait, like thinking about what your thoughts are, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really provide me with value. Then why am I doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like I can be
Yeah.
expending that resource on things that do matter, like running a coffee shop, right? Like building a business, right? Like we want to build software products because we love it, not because, I mean, of course there's outcomes to that, but the real reason we want to do it is because we love building products, right? In our roles now, or in a role that we would be able to manage ourselves as entrepreneurs. Restaurants, we've talked about that. Like, hey, we want to manage restaurants or own our own restaurants. Why?
Because it's fun.
Yeah, we love food,
and it also,
and it's an experience we want. You know,
also goes to the overarching goal that we have.
Oh yeah,
right? It's just a step.
Yeah.
Towards a goal that we have.
Yeah.
It's all about life. Is all about taking steps so you can be moving forward or in some direction, so you're not standing still, right?
Yeah.
So our goal is to become self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Spend time with our family.
Yeah.
And live a good life.
Yeah.
And if that's
how life is too short. Yeah.
And that's how we feel we're gonna get there. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
I think the perception that like, and we sort of jumped to a little bit of that, but I think I think the perception of what you're doing and caring about what other people think is just toxic in general.
But I do want to speak or empathize with communities that do that, because like these are very tight knit communities.
Yeah.
Right. Like
which
the Tongan, which is great, right?
Yeah.
Like the Pakistan culture is very tight knit from a family perspective, and even outside of the family member, right? Like, for example, as a Tongan, like I call my second and third cousins like my brothers and sisters, right? Like there's no concept of, oh, but that's my immediate family versus, like my cousins. Like, no, those are like, I slept in the same floor or bed with them when I was growing up. They're like my brothers and sisters,
right,
you know?
Right.
They might be my third, fourth cousins.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even family friends, people I'm not even related to, right? Like my mom had a best friend growing up, and her children are like brothers and sisters to me, right?
Yeah.
So those are things that I love, but at the same time, the things that I do not agree with is just the and social media has made it worse to some extent.
Right.
The Facebook mafia. Oh my gosh, I don't know if that's what you call it, something that carries into Pakistan culture. But
I think I'm not even like on Facebook much, honestly. So yeah, it's like people are always on the lookout for like what you're doing wrong, what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, not that that's not why I'm on it. I think it's just honestly I don't have the time to like deal with it. But yeah, I'm totally aware of what you're talking about. I think people are extremely judgy.
Oh yeah.
And they see one clip of what, like a millisecond, less than a millisecond time frame photo or something, and then they judge you on it. And I think that's feeds into the same thing, right? When people think about it. So anyway, but I mean, I think I do want to bring us back to like the question on hand was like, how would you change it? And I feel like I feel like we talked about like being reputable ourselves and just taking action for ourselves and just demonstrating, being a sort of, or maybe a role model would be the right word?
Yeah.
Is the right word to be a role model, so that
I don't think I'm going to sign up for that, but
no, as in like be a role model in the sense that like
in
the sense like role models are just all about, it's implicit. It's not like you're explicitly going out and saying I'm the role model. It's more like you're just acting how you
most def
want to act according to your values and your beliefs, and people will see that, and if they respect you, they'll most likely try to emulate you. Right. So I think like that, and that can be good or positive. But I feel like if you're trying to change people's perceptions about toxic like
cultural beliefs,
toxic cultural beliefs, I think that's really the best way to do it, is become reputable so that people respect you.
Fair.
And then just emulate your values.
Yeah.
And people will, sort of learn from that or grow from that or not, right? And that's and if they're happy in what they're doing, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how this works, and this is probably something this bleeds over into American culture as well, but one of the things I don't necessarily agree with, and this kind of relates back to the entrepreneurship topic, is like within the Tongan culture, like there's this belief that if you just go to school, get a degree, you're going to be rich after, right? Like it doesn't matter what Like
The
there's never a
footnote of
discussion.
the
Yeah.
footnote of those loans.
Yeah,
The cost
exactly,
of
right. Like good
education.
old ISAs that we talked about in episode 1
Yeah.
or second episode
Yeah.
technically. But yeah, like there's never but like if you really think about it too, that's part of the American dream, which we can segue into at some point in time.
Right.
But like, you're taught if you go to school, you get your 4-year degree, everything's set, but the nuances are never discussed. Like the loans that you're going to have to pay off and how much of I guess a weight that's going to be on you for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
Like I was fortunate enough where I went to a state school, right? So it wasn't exorbitant. I lived at home, right? I didn't stay in a dorm, so that was another cost I didn't have to pay. And then the third one is what you call it? I had a GI Bill, right?
Yeah.
So they literally paid me to go to school. So
Right.
what that means is my school was paid for, and I got an extra stipend on top of that monthly in order to get that. And I received other scholarship, like
Yeah.
the SMART scholarship for engineering. But that was all perturbated off of, like doing something in favor of getting that. For example, I had to spend 6 years in the military in order to get that GI
Yeah.
Bill, right? The SMART scholarship, not only did I have to like compete for that, but also I had to compete within a field that was valuable to the government, which at the time is government or is engineering, right? So like one thing I always want to preach, not preach. We just said we're not preaching here, but or suggest, right? And emulate to some extent is like your degree matters, right? Like the that's probably going to be a discussion that we'll have to have at some point in time, but like I always have this discussion with folks or kids who are looking at getting into a certain field.
Oh, sorry. Let's be very clear here. You're saying
Yes.
which degree you go into matters.
Yes, which degree you go into.
'Cause last time we had a conversation
matters.
about is college needed.
Oh,
to be
yes,
successful,
yes.
So
So if you choose to go down the route, make sure that you're getting some return on investment. I will say specifically here, some degrees do not have the same return on investment from a probability standpoint than others,
yeah,
right? Like we can honestly, I mean,
yeah,
there's enough data out there that showcases that, the degree that you choose, if you decide to go to school, matters.
yeah.
And I think that's not taken into account a lot of times, right? So my suggestion to anyone even debating whether to go to college is not go to college, right? Like figure out what you want to do specifically and then go to college. Like I see too many cases where people are like, yeah, I'm going to go open general, go through their freshman year, go through their sophomore year. Now they're stuck in a position where they have to choose something because they're going to hit their junior year and they need a specific degree. So they choose something that's, I'm not going to name any degrees, but they'll choose something that doesn't provide you with the return on investment, or they don't really need that. They don't even choose to go into that field later on. They know that, but they're just like, hey, I've already have sunk costs, which is a fallacy, by the way. But they're like, I've already done 2 years. Let me go do another 2 years just to finish it out and have a degree at the end of the day. So, yeah, these are that's a toxic belief that I don't necessarily agree with.
And
right?
honestly, I believe the colleges actually want you to change your major because what's going to happen is
You'll stay longer.
you're going to change your major.
Yeah.
You're going to need to take other core classes now for your new major, especially if you made a dramatic shift from like English to engineering, which I don't know how often that happens, but then you've got much more core classes to take, and now you're staying longer, and you're paying a lot more money.
Yeah.
So it's actually an incentive for colleges to promote that.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious actually.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good topic because I think actually this could be probably a session of itself where we could talk about like what advice would we give freshmen or seniors, I guess,
or our younger selves, huh?
in high school who are going to college. What would we tell people, even people just within our own major because we know them best, like other electrical engineers or other, I guess, computer science students entering college? What would we tell them to do? Because I feel like a lot of people just feel like the degree itself and the education they're getting is enough, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's not.
Yeah, it's definitely
not enough.
Yeah.
Just the courses themselves are not enough. But that's another topic that I don't want to dive into right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've always had discussions about. Sorry about that, or just like inner monologues with myself on like what would I say to like younger folks as I'm approaching them, right? About school and to your point, like it's not a monolith, right? Like some kids are apt to go to school and their passions align with that. I think you brought that up last episode where we were talking about research, right?
Yeah.
Academia makes sense there to some extent,
How
right?
did we get to this topic?
Huh?
How did we get to this topic?
Oh yeah. Which one? The topic?
We started with
Toxic cultural beliefs.
and then how we would. The
Ah,
question
yes,
was
yes,
how
yes.
would we sort of convince people
Yes.
or of
Of how to get away from it. Yeah.
Of I guess abandoning may be a strong
That's a
word,
good
but
point.
abandoning
Yeah.
this toxic cultural beliefs.
Yes.
And
I think
feel
we
like
also-
I said emulating, being reputable and
Yep.
emulating a certain way.
I think we should also cover how it's impacted us as adults.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I just wanted to.
Bring
I
it
didn't
back.
realize. No,
Yeah.
I didn't want to bring it back. I just wanted to think. I just forgot how we got to that topic because I mean it's an interesting topic. We can
Yeah.
keep going down the rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
like you said, I think we could probably talk about it.
Yeah.
Like in depth.
That should probably be its own session, though.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
think
Agreed.
so,
Agreed.
yeah.
Not.
I like to close the loop on this, like how it's impacted me in my life. The toxic aspects of it definitely make me not want to continue to carry those cultural beliefs. The problem is when you're in a situation like that, you typically throw the baby out with the bathwater. What I mean by that is like you take it whole or you don't accept it at all.
Right.
So what I'm always fearful of is like, whenever I think about
Bucketing it as like and treating
like,
it as wholesale.
F this. I'm
Yeah.
not doing any of these cultural things because I don't believe in aspects of it, which are toxic, and I'm justified in doing so. But at the same time, what I've done is generalize the culture as a whole versus decoupling toxic aspects of that and eliminating that from how I want to move forward with it.
Yeah.
So I as I reflect on it myself, like that's something that I'm trying to educate myself on, trying to understand like, okay, what aspects of the tongue culture maintain that beauty, keep that community strong, and how can I give it to my kids for them to propagate moving forward? Because a lot of it, like the toxic stuff, if I allow that to be the dominant narrative for my culture, it's going to die here, right? It's going to die with me, and my kids will never propagate it forward, right? Like as beautiful as the language is, as beautiful as the people are and the community is, if those toxic beliefs continue to resonate, those are things that I'm not going to push forward.
Makes sense.
And guess what? Who are the cultural carriers? You and I, right?
Yeah.
You carry your culture moving forward here in America, and it's hard to do so here,
Yeah.
right? Especially with America, and you're trying to immigrate or integrate your values that you've gained from
Right.
your culture into this culture, right?
Yeah.
And then like you're going to have kids one day. You got to think about how you're going to have them propagated moving forward while living in America if they don't decide to move back to Pakistan on their own, right?
Yeah.
So these are things that I always think about, just like how will I present this to my children for them to push forward?
Yeah, I think I can probably the impact on me, I think is very similar to the impact that it's had on you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same way you said, you make an explicit decision to not perpetuate those cultural beliefs. I do the same. And I think, there's probably other impacts that it's had on my life, but I think one thing definitely is that I'm very vocal about my disagreement with some of these cultural beliefs. And I think it's also led me to have a much more diverse set of friends.
Yeah.
In general, my disagreement with these beliefs has led me to have a much more diverse set of friends.
Yeah.
Right. And not just partake or be part of a group of friends that is very uniform.
Yeah, like
right?
homogeneous, right?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's got individuality, but I think generally homogeneous, because if you're just hanging out one cultural side of it, you're going to sort of abide by those cultural norms, right? And I feel like my disagreement has sort of led me to have a wide variety of friends, which I think is awesome. Yeah. Right. I think,
and not to say you still have a great group of like Pakistani friends.
Of course.
Too.
I've got a solid group of core Pakistani friends that I've sort of known, but I feel like we are very aligned as far as like what our beliefs are and stuff like that too. Right. And also different in some beliefs, right? Yeah. But again, it's very diverse. Right? Agreed. And I think the other thing I would say is I'm very particular about making sure, I guess this ties into the first one, like where I'm very vocal about not partaking in them. It's like I'm very particular about like what values or beliefs, and I overanalyze some of these. Yeah, I think you probably do the same.
Yeah,
I overanalyze maybe not overanalyze, but I just analyze things in a way. I'm like, is this beneficial?
Yeah.
Is this hurting? Is this toxic? Is this not? And I analyze different aspects of
Yeah.
the culture as I'm sort of facing them or going through
Yeah.
certain things
I,
to see if it's like toxic or not, which I think it's a good thing.
yeah.
Maybe sometimes it's not a good thing. I don't know.
I do want to call out some things too, though. Like there's some. So, for example, like my mother and father or my grandparents, they are very embedded in the culture, right? So there are some things that I don't necessarily agree with. Not, and they're not toxic. I just don't agree with them. But I do it just because I love them as people, right? Like those are things that I will continue to do because. But to your point, it's not because I'm doing it because I believe in the culture or I don't believe I'm being fake. It's more because
And
I,
I would
I want
actually,
to respect, my parents, grandparents, whoever it is that I
I'd
love
actually
dearly.
probably go ahead and make the assumption
Yeah.
that the things that you go ahead and do, even though you necessarily don't agree with them,
Yeah.
aren't necessarily toxic,
Yeah, yeah, and that's the point I was trying to
right?
drive, right?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not necessarily toxic. So you can still be
Yeah.
again part of the culture. Be very particular about what you partake in
Yeah.
and what you perpetuate, and analyze.
Yep.
It's like, is this toxic or not? And then, like you said, if it makes your grandparents happy, but those things are most likely, in my opinion, are not
Not
toxic.
toxic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have no problem like
Yeah.
arguing with my parents about things that I believe are toxic
Yeah.
in general. Well, I just thought of another good one,
What's that?
another toxic cultural like thing. It's not a
Oh,
belief.
go
It's
ahead
more
and
like,
bring it up.
well, well, I want to wrap up this one
Yeah.
first, and I can go into that again. But anything else you want to add?
I actually need to step out to go there use the restroom again, but
Okay.
go ahead and wrap it up for us. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Sorry
All right.
about
Cool. Well, I'll let Rocky come back, and then we'll cut it here, and we'll start up when he gets back.
Sorry about that, folks. I drank way too much seltzer water before this, so my bad.
Right.
But
So
we yep.
yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you were gonna talk about.
Yeah. So like that's one
the-
more thing that comes
Yep.
to mind, which is interesting. I think. It's not. I think it's toxic, for a couple of reasons, but it's not really a belief. It's more just like something that's like a practice, not a practice because nobody explicitly does it. It's more like implicit.
Yeah.
Interracial marriage.
Ooh.
Interracial marriage. You know what's that?
You're about to get canceled.
Yeah,
You're about to
no.
get both of us canceled
Well,
right
it's
now.
not that I'm against it.
Yeah.
I believe in interracial marriage.
No. I'm talking about you about to get canceled by like
Pakistanis?
traditionalists.
No, it's like so. I think one
Yeah.
thing is interesting is because like one thing important that's it's
Yeah.
important in Muslim culture is like the person you marry has to be Muslim, right?
Yep.
But it's very again, I'm just talking about from a cultural perspective, right? Like it has to be Muslim. And a lot of people, like, there's some people who don't marry Muslim, like, especially when they come to America,
Yep.
like they meet somebody, but they're not Muslim. But like I think majority of Pakistanis and Muslims typically tend to marry
Yeah.
Muslims. And what's fascinating is that Islam is a very like diverse
Yeah.
religion. It's nothing like there's no like hierarchy in race
Yep.
in any way,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's why it's cultural and not religious.
Yeah.
And Islam is again not there's no hierarchy in race. Every race is equal,
Got it.
right? And there's nothing that says one race is better than another in any way,
Uh-huh.
shape, or form in the religion.
Yep.
But the cultural aspect is very different.
Ooh.
It's not
You're
necessarily
gonna
like
extend this conversation because
it's
I
not-
have some thoughts on
it's
this.
very not. It's not necessarily like better or worse.
Yeah.
It's more like it's like weird to Pakistani people when somebody marries outside, even if the other person is Muslim, which is like
Interesting.
goes against like but me and I think my sister and I are strongly like opposed to this. Like,
Yeah.
wait a second, that literally goes against the religion.
Yeah.
Like you being opposed to somebody marrying somebody outside the religion.
Yeah.
Granted, they're Muslim
Yeah.
or not, right? Then you can't have an opposition to that.
Yeah.
Like I can understand like somebody opposing when they're not Muslim because okay, it creates like you lose out religion. You have to make sacrifices in the religion aspect of
Uh-huh.
it. But when it's cultural, it's like I feel like cultural sacrifices are more doable because we value
Yeah.
in our religion. The religion is better,
Yeah.
higher than the culture,
Yeah. It
and the
sets
culture things
precedence.
that go against religion should
Yeah.
not be practiced.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you try to like bring like somebody who's not Pakistani,
Yeah.
I feel like it's gonna be like they're gonna be weirded out, or some people just look down upon it
Yeah.
or talk behind your back about it. And I feel like, luckily, my family's not like that. My family's very inclusive. and like we're really supportive of that. And
Yeah.
I think like we're open to like learning about that,
Yeah.
right? So I think, but that's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
100%. And I think I don't want to go too deep into it. We can talk
Yeah.
about it another day.
Well,
But like,
yeah, nah, yeah.
but I just wanted to bring up that's one that I
Yeah.
think that I've had conversations about with
I think that
multiple
also.
people.
So obviously, I'm in an interracial marriage,
Right.
right? But yeah, I think that's something that's to your point. I don't know how to put this. I mean, like, just it's not. It's not. Yeah, your people are gonna look at you weird. I think that's the term you used, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're just gonna,
And talk behind your back too.
yeah, they're
Right,
just
like,
not gonna like it,
Yeah,
especially like the older folks.
yeah.
Right.
And I mean, like, to your point, like, for me, for example, I joined the military when I was like mad young, 17, right? Like, there's not too many Tongans here in America, and much less like outside of California, right? So obviously, growing up, like, I'm not going to be able to maintain, like, dating wise, right? Like,
Right.
if I were to like maintain that belief, that cultural belief, like, I wouldn't be able to meet anybody pretty much until I got back to like a densely populated Tongan place, which for me at least, I think I've met one other Tongan person here, and they're gone now. So right,
yeah.
like I would have limited myself to the point where
Right.
like I would have not been with anyone, right?
Yeah.
Like so,
I
yeah,
mean, I don't want to go into another topic.
Yeah, I was
about
about
like
to say,
everybody's
yeah.
got preferences
Yeah.
and all that, right? I don't want to go into that topic.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like that's another topic
yeah,
that we can talk
yeah.
about
I
all day.
definitely
But
think of
the I think, and we probably want to maybe we can make this a separate segment because I feel like we already started this conversation about this toxic culture.
So what is this segment? What is this segment where we're going to
interracial?
Interracial?
Cultural.
Okay.
Toxic cultural beliefs part 2 interracial marriages.
Got it. Yeah,
know?
let's do it.
So we can probably
So
cut,
we're
we can
coming
probably
in?
cut your like when you went to the restroom. We'll probably
So we'll
just
cut that one. Yeah.
So anyway, I think like it's so interesting because I feel like I've had this argument before with people. I was like, wait a second, hold up. And the argument always made is like, well, they may not fit in the traditions or like the cultural
Yeah.
thing. Well, my point is, well, the religion
Yeah.
says you should be
right?
accepting
Yeah.
of the thing, especially if you value religion. Now,
Yeah.
my argument is always, well, you value the religion.
Yeah. That should be the
Religion is very
precedence,
accepting.
right?
That should take precedence.
Yeah.
Why is your culture overpowering religion? That's, I think, one of the biggest problems that the Pakistani culture and like the relationship aspect
Uh-huh.
face.
But
is
is
the
that
culture overpowers the
Yeah.
religion?
But is that like I feel like every culture has that? Like they want to be
Yeah,
insulated,
for
right?
sure,
like
for sure.
so I want to make sure we're not like just lambasting attacking Pakistan.
No, I think it's like-
culture or like
it-
Tongan culture.
Yeah, a lot of
yeah.
cultures tend to do that.
Yeah.
I think in any culture you go, if there's a religion,
Yeah.
a lot of times the culture leaks and sort of overpowers
Yeah.
the aspects of the religion. Where, just like I said, interracial marriage should be like celebrated
Yeah.
and supported.
Yep.
Whereas, and it's not necessarily looked down like not supported. It's more of like just the perceptions are like a lot of times is like people are weirded out by it.
Yeah.
People find it strange.
Well, it's not the norm too,
It's
right?
not the norm,
yeah.
which is probably why, right?
Yeah.
But again, our job is to make it the norm.
Yeah, stress
Especially
test.
if you believe that
Yeah.
if you believe something is right, our
Yeah.
job is to emulate it, right?
Yeah.
And if you not just don't go out of your way to marry someone who's not your like culture, right? It's like if you happen to meet somebody that make like you like are happy with and they make you happy, you make them happy.
Yeah,
and
it
you want to
shouldn't.
marry them, and
yeah,
like, again, within your religious beliefs, like if they're Muslim, then you're Muslim and they're Muslim, and you guys you want to
Yeah.
marry that, then you should do that.
but that's
right?
because that's what you value too, right? Like so, for example, like I'm not religious, right?
Right.
So I would probably
Again, that's what
Yeah.
they depending on what
Yeah,
you
exactly.
value. They make
Yep.
if you're a Muslim,
yes,
and you want to marry a
and
Muslim,
you value
right?
that,
which
yes,
a lot of Muslims
Mhm.
do, right?
Yes.
A lot of the Pakistanis do, which is that's totally
Yeah.
fine. You can have that, but it can be a different race.
yep,
I
Totally
think
agree.
that's what I face a problem when it becomes race.
Yeah.
It's like I understand the religious aspect because like the religious aspect is like a lot of things in there that like you raising your kids becomes harder.
Yeah.
Right, and things like that. So I understand that, right?
Yep.
And that makes sense. If you're not strongly religious either way, both of you are
Yeah.
not, then it won't be much of
Yeah.
an issue. But if you are, then one is religious and one's not.
Yeah.
That becomes a little bit of an issue based on
Totally agree.
what you're to a degree, right? But the race aspect when it comes to race is like, all right, well,
Yeah,
now
that's
you're like, especially if it contradicts your own religious beliefs.
yeah,
You know, it's like, well, is that why? It's like,
yeah.
but then that
Oh,
doesn't make sense. We should be supporting this, right? And
yeah,
the other aspect of this is that there's a lot of people who are converts to a certain religion. For
yeah,
example, even Christianity, like back in the day when they
yeah.
were like going out and like Africa
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
converting people, right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like white people
Yep.
would have looked down upon a white person marrying a black
Yeah.
person.
I mean, look at America,
I mean,
right?
still today it's looked down upon, right? So
Yeah,
imagine then.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, exactly. Even today, it's
Like it
happening,
was,
right?
yeah.
Like,
We had to pass a law in order to get it
right,
legalized, right?
exactly, right.
Yeah,
And I feel like, well, this is the problem,
yeah,
right? And isn't it also interesting in terms of religion? Coming back to the concept of religion, like this person just converted,
yeah,
and their community may have been a different religion,
yeah,
and they've converted to your religion, whether it's
yeah,
Christianity or whatever, Hinduism, Jainism, Islam, whatever
yeah.
your religion might be, and they've converted, and now they've sort of somewhat alienated themselves.
Yes.
Especially if their community is religious and not secular,
Yeah.
then they've alienated themselves in a lot of cases from their
Mm-hmm.
own community, that
Yeah.
of their own race.
They've taken
And
that risk
whatnot,
essentially.
right? They've taken that
Yeah.
risk, and shouldn't we or you, whoever is religious, shouldn't like you be supporting it if somebody from your culture is going to marry somebody in a different culture
Well,
that is
I-
converted? Like,
I-
should be
yeah.
it's not like we should be doing like our best to welcome that person into the fold.
Yeah. Well, at
And
this
I
point,
feel like as
yeah.
a Muslim myself, like I would feel like you should support if I decided to go marry a Muslim whoever person, we should be welcoming that person to the fold because they've converted, taken a
Yeah.
risk, and they're like they might be alone, and they may not be feel supported, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're just using too much logic there, Hammad.
A little too much logic, a little too much.
I mean, like you got to remember,
I broke somebody's
yeah,
brain.
I don't think a lot of these people who are making that argument are being logical in that instance, right?
Culture overpowering.
Yeah,
logic
exactly.
too.
Because, like, I mean, like you said, like, hey, if religion is embedded within our culture and religion does not call this out, like, who are we to contradict that by, holding ourselves to this even further constraint
Right.
and disallowing it to some extent?
Yeah.
I mean, because, yeah, even in that situation, it'd be weird because, like, isn't your goal to kind of like ensure that the religion is maintained and spread, I guess, to some
Well,
extent?
even if that's not your goal, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody's going. I'm not going out there preaching about Islam, right?
Yeah.
And those who are like, more power to
Yeah,
them,
more power
right?
to them. Yep.
But at the end of the day, is if you're saying you are of a certain religion,
Fair.
right? Again, like it brings with it a way of life,
Yeah.
right? And that way of life includes being inclusive and being
yeah.
like welcoming people into the fold and making them feel supported and making them feel like even if that person isn't even a Muslim.
Yeah.
Or again, in the case of Christianity, the Christianity preaches both Islam and Christianity preach like you should be helping people.
Yes.
And making them feel supported and
The
welcome
golden
in,
rule,
in
right?
your community,
Yeah.
right? Whether they're Muslim or not, like you're not supposed to mistreat people,
Yeah.
regardless, right?
Mhm.
And so I feel like doing that and like sort of shunning them or like implicitly shunning them without actually going on and say, "Oh, you don't be here," like that's still an act of like aggression or violation of your religion.
Yeah. I mean, especially that's another point that you brought up, which I wasn't thinking about. Like, coming from, so say an individual is coming from another religion that is very, insulated, right? And they're taking a risk to join another group, right? Like to your point, now they're isolated, and they're going to only get further isolated, if folks don't accept them. But I don't know, religion, or in this case, the cultural aspect of it, it can sometimes just not have that logic. I think it's more emotional than it is.
It's purely emotional. It's purely just like being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think people are just things that they find strange, right?
Well,
they find uncomfortable.
Let's
they
talk
tend
about
to avoid.
that. Like, I think the discussion here is interracial marriages, and like, what is the fear? Is the fear that like, I do think like there's a fear.
I think a lot of times it's just being comfortable.
Do you?
Themselves. Like,
but I guess like what I was saying is, do you think like those who are the old guard, for example, are fearful that they're going to lose their culture because interracial marriage is going to dilute the race, for example?
Maybe. I think that's probably a part of it.
Yeah.
I don't actually disagree with
And
that. I think that
yeah.
might be a part of it. The thing is that I think it's really just a matter of comfort. Just foundationally. I think,
Elaborate on that. Like,
let's say and also this is important is to notice that it's very it's more of a concern in cultures where your family, for example, is more tight knit.
yeah,
Like in
it is.
Pakistani culture, like a lot of families live together for a long period of time, like in a big house.
Yeah.
A lot of the siblings live together.
And that's the
right?
same in the Tongan culture too.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. I think
Yeah.
I actually think that's beautiful. I mean, I think there's value in like there's another topic going out of that for
Yeah.
a bit and like experiencing being independent and learning
Yeah.
all that. But being a part of that in the long term, I think there's beauty in
Yeah.
that. Now, but if you're all living together and somebody comes in that's from a different culture that's not your culture, and the people living there might feel uncomfortable. That's not necessarily saying they don't have the right to come into your culture and into your family.
Mm-hmm.
That's like I think it's just like from their perspective, like you might feel a little uncomfortable, which is I think the biggest reason why they might feel uncomfortable just by this concept of the interracial marriage. Because,
Got it.
But then again, it's also a little selfish because like you're saying like, oh, I won't be completely happy and comfortable. Right? It's from our perspective rather than like the other person thinking about it from the other person's perspective who's coming in.
Having empathy for that
individual.
Also like,
it's like, why are you worrying about that rather than the happiness of the two people involved?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things do boil down to like just people being selfish or not having empathy for other parties, right? Like if you really think about it.
And it's not intentional. I think it's just something that's like automatic. Right.
Yeah.
So I think people are amenable. I think people a lot of people are, right? If you talk to them and have that conversation, I think they'll actually realize it and it's like, oh, you know what, that makes sense. Yeah. I think a lot of people are like that, especially if you explain it to them in a reasonable, like logical way. It's like, you know, this doesn't actually make sense. And
I mean, we're creatures of habit, right?
Yeah.
So we're always going to probably be against disruption unless it benefits us greatly.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's definitely an interesting topic.
That's interesting. I think, that was
yeah.
that came up to me. I remember thinking about it in the beginning when we were starting off this conversation, and then it sort of just
like, keeping that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, and in a way, it's kind of just like I left my mind, and then as we were wrapping up, I thought about it again. So I feel like we should talk about it.
I think a lot of these things that we've discussed though would be probably, I wouldn't say toxic maybe, but I'll just say toxic. Like toxic cultural beliefs across other cultures as well, right? Like we're just speaking about it from our perspective. So
right.
At the end of the day, like everyone's got something that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
And
if you disagree, come at us. Leave a comment.
Leave a comment in the on the bottom of this video. Yeah. But most definitely. I think one thing that we talked about a lot, and maybe it's a good time for us to segue, especially with toxic cultural beliefs, was the dream that was associated with that. Do you think it's a good time for us to segue now into the second question that we got? Thanks to the user, by the way, who submitted that, about the American dream and the definition that we have and how we believe it's shifted from previous definitions.
Do we want to cut here and then resume again? Like we can resume it right now, but do you want to cut it here for the purpose of the?
Oh, for the purpose of video. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. Unless you have other things you want to talk about. Okay. Okay. Cool. True.